It is the Chris and Amy show on KMOX, and it's time to go to the Quiver River Electric guest line because once every couple of weeks on Tuesdays, we have a meeting with our boss, and he berates us for 1 hour and then sends us about our day and says, I hope you have a nice day.
And occasionally we get the nitpicky text.
Yeah, we get a nitpicky text.
Yeah.
The bottom, what we're trying to say is this is a bad work environment. And to talk more about that and what can be done, what should be done as you have your employment, and maybe if you are an employer or somebody who manages people, a good way to do it. Let's talk to Mark Graben, who is a consultant, a workplace consultant, a speaker, and he's got a book coming out this fall called The Silence Tax, How Leaders Drive Out Fear and Futility. Mark is with us on KMOX. We appreciate you being with us. How you doing, Mark?
I'm doing well. I hope you're just kidding about the meeting and the text.
Well, our boss his name is Steve.
Yeah,
and he's pretty tough on us.
He's very tough on us.
Is that okay?
Yeah, what do we do about it?
What do we do about it?
What do you do about it? Well, I'm glad you feel safe calling that out on the radio. Hopefully you have the chance.
Yeah.
He's not listening.
He doesn't listen. That's a great point, though. That is a good point.
I hope Steve is open to feedback. But, I think, a tough boss, it depends on what kind of tough they are. I think a boss who is demanding but helpful is better than somebody that just gives notes and criticism. I think there's often this false trade-off that a leader can only be nice or focused on performance. I think the best leaders, you might use the word kind. They're being constructive. They know that you can do better, and they're trying to help you kind of reach your peak level of performance instead of just nitpicking and criticizing.
Mark, let's go to kind of a tagline here is that the nice boss era is over, and a lot of companies are telling managers and bosses to be tougher again. But to that point of the nice boss era, do you think that we had a pendulum swing where maybe bosses were too lenient, especially with work from home and people just saying, hey, I've got family issues, I can't show up today? Because at some point, too much leniency does make an office unproductive.
I agree. And as with a lot of things in business, the pendulum does swing back and forth. I think the key is finding the sweet spot in the middle, finding balance, because you're right. One extreme or the other can be counterproductive in different ways. So I think a lot of it goes with the job market. If there's a shortage of employees, managers are, I think understandably going to focus more on keeping employees happy, keeping them engaged. I think people leave jobs for reasons other than just pay and compensation. I think when people are working in a great environment, they're more likely to stay. And then I think when, maybe the pendulum in the job market has swung the other direction, and, the classic tough boss thinks, well, people here should feel lucky to have a job. Well, maybe that's swung too far in the other direction where the boss thinks they can get away with being demanding or being controlling to an extreme. And they might think, oh, well, employees don't have any other options, so I don't have to be nice anymore. I think, the sweet spot is somewhere in the middle.
There is this social media account of a guy. He's a consultant of some kind, I believe, and his whole account is people sending him interactions they have had with their managers or bosses, and some of them are just ridiculous that you can't believe that a manager would say or do the kinds of things they do. How prevalent is it that we are dealing with managers or supervisors or CEOs of companies that are like that are just not just unfriendly but cruel sometimes?
Well, it's far too common. The beginning of my career, I worked for a number of bad bosses, I would say, back in the auto industry, the yellers and the screamers. They would just kind of, blame and shame everybody for the company's performance when it wasn't really the fault of those individual workers. I think there's two categories of the bad boss. One is, the people that are promoted into management roles that maybe just shouldn't be managing people. A lot of companies will choose the best individual performers, and that doesn't correlate well with being a leader necessarily. A lot of times people take the promotion because that's the way to get, higher compensation. And, so maybe, the companies have selected the wrong people for the wrong reasons. A lot of companies don't give a lot of leadership training to people they've put in those positions. And so they might be pressured to be a know-it-all, or, to come down on people too hard. I think the CEO who, is the founder of a company is a different category altogether, where, in entrepreneurship, you've got to have a healthy enough ego to say, I'm going to start a business. And, the survival rate on businesses is not great. So you've got to have a strong ego to even go there. But I think the companies that survive the longest and do the best have founder CEOs who realize they don't have all the answers. They can't possibly have all the answers. They've got to engage with their employees and draw the best ideas out of people, regardless of their rank or history in the organization.
You hear people say you need to stand up for yourself, and that's easier said than done. Is fear of punishment the number one reason why employees don't speak up?
It's a big reason. And, I would never counsel people to say, you should speak up no matter what. Like, everybody has to think about, the cost benefit ratio of like, well, if I feel like I should say something or I want to say something at work, what do I think the benefit would be to the company, the benefit to myself versus the risk? And if people fear that they're going to get in trouble, or if they know they're going to get in trouble because they've seen it in their own experience or from others, it's totally rational to stay quiet to protect yourself. And, the fear factor is real, but there's a lot of research, and I've done my own polling with different audiences and groups I work with. The number one reason people keep quiet isn't actually fear, it's futility, where people say like, well, I'm not afraid to speak up. Yeah. It doesn't lead to anything. It's not worth the effort. And, there's different things leaders can do to try to drive out fear, but we also have to make sure people don't feel like it's a matter of futility.
Talking to Mark Graban, who is a workplace consultant with us here on KMOX. So what would you advise people to do who, as they try to navigate a difficult boss, and maybe it's a situation where they can't just up and leave right away for whatever reason, and who knows what that reason could be, but maybe they are looking for a job and it could be a long time before they get one. So what do you do in the meantime? How do you navigate somebody who's just really tough to work with or work for?
Sometimes you have to just try to keep your head down and keep your head off the chopping block. If you're looking for a job, I think it's still true. The best time to look for a job is when you already have one. Sometimes you just have to choose to keep quiet to protect yourself. Now, there might be times where you feel like, it's necessary to speak up. You might try testing the waters, find a small issue to try to bring up, just try to be fact-based and positive about things, saying like, something to the effect of, here's something that happened yesterday. I'd like to talk about it. I have a concern. That might land better than making sweeping statements like, nobody here cares about quality, or nobody here listens. But, I think you have to see what the response is to testing the waters. If those waters, if you will, seem shark infested, you might sort of, backpedal and, but if there's any receptiveness to what you're trying to bring up, then that might be an opportunity to try to lean into it, realizing that, if there are risks and you don't feel good speaking up, keep looking for that new job.
Are there ever times where maybe you don't want to go to HR because that's the place it seems like in most corporate settings that you would go to if there is an issue with a supervisor, but you may not be confident that whatever you're going to talk to them about is addressed the way you want it to and it doesn't come back to hurt you?
Well, see, and right there, that's the problem is that people do fear that it's going to backfire or get turned on them. I'm not an HR professional. I've worked in a lot of organizations where people are distrustful of the HR organization. I've heard a lot of people say HR is there for the company. It's not there for you. So there might be risk in speaking up. Maybe if you have a relationship with somebody in HR, you can gauge how much you trust the situation. You might talk to some of your colleagues first and see what it's like in your company. I'm not trying to paint with too broad of a brush, but that is one of those situations where the fear factor or the futility factor might kick in. People might say, well, I'm kind of scared to go to HR, or I don't know if it's going to do anything.
It's 5 o'clock. Your employees are heading home. But you're still updating spreadsheets, switching between software, and wondering where the day went. There's a better way. Odoo brings accounting, sales, inventory, CRM, and more together in one fully integrated platform. So you spend less time managing software and more time running your business. Because your workday should end eventually. Try Odoo free at odoo.com. That's ODOO.com.
Now boarding flight 532.
Low energy, unfocused, foggy. You might be dehydrated. 81% of travelers don't feel fully hydrated, and flying increases the risks of dehydration. Gatorade Zero powders have been scientifically designed to help improve hydration balance in the body. Clinically proven electrolyte blend and no artificial colors or flavors. Shop now online or at retailers nationwide. Gatorade hydrates better than water. Is it in you? Symptoms noted are signs of mild to moderate dehydration. Consult a healthcare professional if symptoms persist.
Your line just went down. Production stopped. A supervisor wants answers. And someone's digging through a binder for the maintenance history. Every one of those minutes costs money, and most of the time, that breakdown could have been prevented. That's where Maintain X comes in. Maintain X catches the failure before it happens. Preventative maintenance plans on every key asset to improve reliability. Work orders assigned and tracked right from your phone. Everyone from the floor to the front office is in the loop. Companies on Maintain X have cut unplanned downtime by over 30% and saved thousands on parts and labor every year. See what Maintain X can do for your operation. Try Maintain X free at maintainx.com, an Autodesk company.
Well, along those lines, you use the phrase the silence tax. What is that, and how does it hurt a company's productivity?
Well, the silence tax, it's basically what a company pays when people are silent, when they stop speaking candidly about what's going on in a workplace. And, the silence tax is invisible, and that's the problem. I mean, it doesn't show up literally as a line on the financial statements, but, when people are afraid to speak up about a quality problem, and instead of catching it in the process, it gets out to a customer. That has a huge cost. If people are afraid to speak up about an issue when it's small, it tends to grow, and the cost of the silence tax goes up. And this is a real cost that organizations can try to avoid. There was a survey recently of about 4,000 employees in the U.S., and the survey tried to estimate the cost of poor management, and that was estimated to be $500 billion a year of impact on the U.S. economy. That's just from employee turnover, lost productivity. This is just a gut feeling. I think that estimate's actually low. Because I think the silence tax is being paid by most organizations these days.
So what about from the other perspective? You are a supervisor, you're an employer, you are in charge. How do you find a good balance between, trying to do right by your employees, but also, you got to drive things along too to make sure nothing's falling through? I mean, how do you find that good, happy middle ground?
Yeah, I mean, the best managed organizations and the best performing organizations I've seen, do a good job of setting goals for the organization and for a team. But I think the difference is when current performance is falling short, whether that's on quality or cost or customer service. The most effective leaders engage employees in working together to solve those problems and to close those performance gaps. The worst performing organizations just yell and scream, or maybe more passive aggressively put pressure on people and blame them for the poor performance. I mean, I think one of the worst instances, I heard somebody from a hospital share with me, that their leaders basically just, threatened people. If you can't hit our performance goals, we'll fire you and find people who can. And, that could end up being just a revolving door of bringing in people who are being blamed instead of, stepping back and working on the real issues. So when people feel safe to speak up, when we reduce the cost of speaking up, that reduces the cost to the organization. So again, I don't think treating employees well is at all a trade-off to business performance. They really, I think treating employees well and engaging them as being part of the solution, that does lead to better performance.
The book coming out soon is called The Silence Tax: How Leaders Drive Out Fear and Futility. Mark Graban is the author of that, workplace consultant and podcaster. His podcast is called My Favorite Mistake. We appreciate your time today, Mark. Thank you for being with us. And I believe what we have learned is that when we have our biweekly meetings with Steve, just sit there and take it, because he's vindictive.
Well, if you need me to talk to Steve, I'm willing to do that.
Actually, yes. Can you hang on the line?
We'll
real
have you
quick?
come and do our next meeting with us, our advocate.
I'm here for you,
You
Chris
just
and Amy.
you just sit there in the corner, and when Steve says something inappropriate, you go, nope.
I don't know. Mark's
that's
going to
not it.
listen to the rest of the show, and he'll be on Steve's side by the end of it, probably.
Give me a buzzer and I can zap Steve if he's misbehaving.
Thank you for being with us, Mark.
Thank you, Chris. Thanks, Amy.
That is Mark Graban. Again, the book called The Silence Tax: How Leaders Drive Out Fear and Futility. This is the Chris and Amy Show on KMOX.